So we're now on the video, so be careful what you say. Mind all your P's and Q's. So, Talysha, I'm going to dive into the introduction. And if anyone ever watches the video and then goes back and listens to the podcast, and they'll go, those introductions don't even sound similar. It's because they're not. Usually I change them. So here we go. Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends podcast. Podcast designed to help you feel, see, and think differently about the podiatry profession. With me today is a repeat offender. I have Talysha Reeve. Now, she was back on episode 72, which was over a year ago. No, it's almost a year ago. And we were talking about career benefits of non-traditional CPD. Today, we're talking about something a little bit different. P3, the Progressive Podiatry Project. And I'm in complete dark about this, and Talysha is going to enlighten me what this is all about. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Talysha, how are you doing?
Great, Tyson. It's awesome to be back on here with you.
I enjoyed that introduction. I might keep that one.
Pretty good. I'm impressed.
Yeah, well, I've had a bit of practice now. I'm into the 130 somethings of this particular podcast. So you keep it more relaxed. I think I listened back to the first episode of my first podcast when I did episode 1. And I remember I was one particular episode 5 on It's No Secret, Dr. T. And it was the first person I had on the podcast I did not know. Complete stranger. He was an author in America. I think it was called Fish Out of Water. And as I'm doing the introduction, I could feel my throat starting to tighten up. It was getting hard to talk. And I finally got the intro out. I listened back to it and I go, oh, it sounds so painful. But so now I'm more relaxed. And you're relaxed too.
Yeah, I'm getting very used to talking on camera and webcasts and everything like that over the last 12 months. So
have you been doing a lot of it?
Yeah, it's gotten bigger and bigger, and it's multiple avenues. And now I just do a little bit even of my own with Kinetic therapies, do some Facebook live streams with Jackson, and usually have a few special guests on, normally around musculoskeletal podiatry stuff, footwear.
Oh, okay. So let's dive straight into this. So therefore we can keep the conversation, try and keep me focused. What is the Progressive Podiatry Project?
It's my new project, which I absolutely love. So where it came about was, and you and I have spoken quite a few times over the years about how we should always sort of continue to pursue what excites us. And just when you sort of do that, your career will sort of naturally evolve. And P3 has it's been the evolution of kinetic therapies. So kinetic therapies was originally just musculoskeletal podiatry education, and it was more just focused on initially the live workshops, but then COVID came. And it was more, online, and I sort of built the online course, launched that went really well. And just over the last 12 months with sort of the different networks that just not just myself, but Jackson has developed, and just how it's kind of evolved and the questions that we've got coming in. And so it sort of went from being purely just musculoskeletal education to there were sort of mentoring aspects that were coming in. And COVID was a really good time to sort of sit and reflect at kind of where the whole podiatry journey has taken me over the last sort of 14 years. And part of it was lessons I've learned, and sort of just kind of learn to pick your battles and what you should give a fuck about, basically. So it was,
there's your first F-bomb. So that's right. We'll put a little E on the episode in case the kiddies are in the car.
Yeah, good. Well, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 more.
Yeah, that's all right.
So it was kind of the evolution of all of that. So I started doing a few blogs, and it was on like work relationships, and how if you kind of go into new careers, like podiatry careers and employment arrangements with people, kind of if you treat that how you treat, say, your dating life. So there's the courting and everything like that. So there was a blog of work relationships, and then there was the mentoring component, and then there's the exercise therapies part. And So the Progressive Podiatry Project has sort of become an umbrella for a lot of other aspects for podiatry career development, not just focusing on musculoskeletal podiatry. So yeah, it's basically I'm launching a new website with it, and there's, instead of it purely just being musculoskeletal education through kinetic therapies, it's kind of tailoring a lot of aspects of what we can deliver to people, not just in relation to exercise therapies. It's all those other aspects that I just spoke about.
So is it more along the lines when people are, like, you're talking about MSK, and if people have an interest in that area, but even if they have just where they should be taking their career, or if they're not sure where they should be taking their career?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like building your niche within podiatry. So it's, people go, okay, well, I want to be, say, a sports podiatrist, and we can teach the educational content, but it's sort of separate to that, because there's some people that they're not interested in sort of the career side of things. They just want the musculoskeletal. But then there's other people that want the sort of career. Okay, I've got this interest in it. How can I sort of start to channel that interest and develop my career? So what other aspects I can do, like personal branding, or how to create your sports podiatry niche. So it kind of, the Progressive Podiatry Project sort of encompasses a couple of other avenues that people can draw on to sort of help guide their careers, instead of it just being a sort of one-off CPD event that people will attend or go to, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, but is this something that you could target towards students, like in their final year, instead of waiting until they graduate before they go, oh, now I've just got a shitty job somewhere and all that? Is this something where they should be thinking about this even as a student? Because when Jackson was on the podcast, and he said that he waited, it was something like 6 months before he took the job. He didn't just go and jump on the first job. He wanted a job in a particular area, and he waited that long. So is this something that students should really be thinking about when they're in their final year, and therefore also makes them put more emphasis on certain areas of podiatry while they're studying?
Well, I think definitely. And that's also part of the reason that Jackson has jumped on board with P3.
Yeah.
So he's, as a lot of people know, Jackson, he's got a lot of traction, especially with new and recent graduates and podiatry students, and his new grad tips from a new grad. That's gone really, really well.
That
and
was the podcast episode. That's what it was called.
Oh, it was too. I think that's where the entire premise stemmed from.
Yeah, that's where it came
I
from,
love
was
that.
from that particular episode where he was on the podcast.
Yep. And so Jackson, he's creating, so with P3, it's, we all have our strengths anyway. So Jackson has his niche and his strengths. So I've got mine and my strengths. And we're both at very different sort of stages of our careers. He's a few years practicing. I think in my 14th year. And so we both have different knowledge and skill sets to draw on, and different messages that we can convey. So part of P3 sort of encompasses Jackson's, his new graduate mentoring and education. And then I've got my sort of business side of it, and people, they can draw on that knowledge how they wish, and then fall under, if they do want to develop, the musculoskeletal side as well. So there's a few different bits and pieces that just fall under the P3 umbrella, which is pretty exciting.
So what's the 3 stand for?
Well, it's quite funny. The 3, it's, you know how after you've played around with a few ideas, some themes start to emerge. And so P3, so there's Progressive Podiatry Project. So there's the 3 Ps in the name.
Yeah, okay.
But then there's one monthly subscription that I'm launching in a few weeks. And with that, it's on athletic footwear. And there were 3 main topics each month that we were going to deliver. And then with another online course that I've got launching later on in the year, again, there's 3 main areas. So everything kind of fell into 3. So with the online course, it was the preoperative phase, and then you've got the post-operative management, and then the long-term rehabilitation. So a lot of the bigger content that we were creating, it all seemed to have 3 key messages within that, and then the P with the name. So it's just the rule of three with everything.
Well, it does work that way too. Even when you're giving patients advice, if you give them some advice, give them 3 exercises. Don't give them 10 because they won't remember any of them. But if you give them 3, yeah, they might remember 1, 2. If you only give them 1, they're not going to do it because they're obviously not important. So three is a good number.
I found that, and even if we're breaking it down into so many things, so if we're looking at rehabilitation, we've got the acute phase of rehabilitation, the subacute phase of rehabilitation, and then the long-term phase of rehabilitation. Yeah. So that's another thing that we sort of draw on. And then with the athletic footwear membership that we've got, each month there's the technical aspect that we'll cover, then there's the product aspect, which is the actual what's new and coming up in footwear, and then the clinical application of that, so case studies. So yeah, everything just fell into the three. So
we used to actually, even with patients, I used to explain to them with how weight came, how weight was dispersed on the footwear, and I talk about the rule of 3. That, for example, if they're 100 kilos, when one foot hits the ground, they're going to have 100 kilos on that foot. Then when they're, that's when they were standing, and then when they were walking, it's 1.5, and when they were running, it was 3 times. And someone had written something up about that, calling it the rule of 3.
It exists, and that's essentially where the entire premises sort of evolved and come to.
Okay, so when you're talking about personal branding, because I do like personal branding, is what if somebody doesn't know what they want to do? Like they've graduated, they're working somewhere, could be a job that they're enjoying, but they're not sure. Oh, but I like too many aspects of podiatry. And I've seen that with people that go, I love this and I love that. And do you help them narrow that down to what they should be aiming towards? Or
we kind of, a lot of it is, so I never tell someone sort of, I think you should be doing this. I think throughout the course of a conversation, and self-reflection is essentially, throughout the conversation, you can facilitate someone coming up to their own conclusions. So finding what excites you, I think that's always a key component of what's going to go, because if you don't get excited about it, it's not for you. Yeah. So it's like me with general podiatry. So finding what excites you, and then helping the ideas evolve. Okay, this excites you. What do you want to do with it? And finding sort of if you find what excites you and what gives you energy, then you're going to put the energy into it to get what you want. So most of it is the conversation around that. And then depending on what someone's goal is. So I think one of the best things to do, and you've kind of taught me this, is reverse engineering your idea of success. So if you have sort of the end in mind, so I want to be this, and then breaking it down and what part of that excites you, that's where you can sort of start to figure out where the trajectory is of where you should be shooting for.
Yeah, I think another key thing too, when people are trying to figure out what it is they want to do, is they might have a certain goal that, I want to do this. Then they've got to figure out what amount of work do they need to do to achieve that. And then the big question is, are you prepared to do that work?
Yeah.
And if you're not, then you need to bring down whatever it is you're aiming towards, you need to bring it down slightly to the amount of work you are prepared to put into it.
Yep.
Because I have seen some people that go, I want to have 15 clinics in Queensland, and I want to do this and I want to do that. And I'm going, you're married with 5 kids. Like, seriously, do you want to have 15 clinics that you can run by, and do you want to know, or do you want to know who your children are? Because it's really, sometimes it's hard to do both.
Definitely. And that sort of ties in with kind of, it's, the 4 burners theory.
No, I haven't heard it. I probably maybe, but tell me.
Essentially, it's, so forever people would sort of tout on about the work-life balance, but it's, to me, I feel it's more a work-life boundary. So drawing a line of, this is where work will cross over. Yeah. But the 4 burners theory is, say you've got a gas cooktop.
Yep.
And you can only have one cranked up to 100%, or it all sort of simmering away evenly. So you've got work, health, relationships. I can't remember what the 4th one is, but essentially we've only got so much capacity for everything in life.
Yeah.
And then just being able to sort of triage, like, so if you want to have the career, it is going to come at, 15 clinics. Something will have to give, which may be getting to know your children. Or if there's other people that go, okay, well, I want to spend all my time with my kids, how that leaves X amount of energy to put into work. So it's kind of jumping back to the F-bomb that I dropped. It's figuring out what you give a fuck about. And yeah, so basically coming up with your non-negotiables, that's also another thing that I'll talk to people about when we're sort of trying to pick or guide where they're looking for as far as what they want to do with their careers. So as far as picking your non-negotiables, is if you definitely do not want to work Saturdays, for example, but you want to manage acute sporting injuries, having a Saturday clinic where you've got people coming in for sport injuries, that might be something that's, you have to pick which one of those two means more to you. And I use that example because I've worked in sports clinics and kind of it was sort of gun to my head, like, you have to work Saturdays. And I didn't care enough about treating acute sport injuries to work Saturdays. I was happy to give that away.
Yeah, well, it's no different to somebody who's, I don't want to work past 5:30.
Yep.
Because they might have children, or they've got other sporting events, they've got things they're doing themselves. But if you're involved with some sporting clubs and you need to be there after hours, or you need to be at games, it is that balance. So I think it's really important for people when you're talking about the work-life balance. I don't believe you can actually balance into it. I think at certain times work does take a priority, and at certain times your family takes a priority. But over the long term, they do sort of balance themselves out. But I think it comes down to what it is that you really want.
Yeah, 100%.
I was talking about the 15 clinics in your family. Like, I know people that have got a lot of clinics and have got great family life, and they've been able to balance the two perfectly. So it doesn't mean you can't have 15 clinics and live an awesome life, but it's difficult.
Definitely. I remembered what the 4 burners are. So we've got work,
Yep.
we've got health, we've got friends, and we've got family. So essentially relationships make up 2 of the 4. And that's where I actually believe that it's a work-life boundary versus having a work-life balance.
Yeah.
Because I'm very much guilty of it. And I think anyone that's burnt themselves out, we buggered up the boundary and it just completely becomes all consuming and takes over. And then you don't have anything left to give to the rest of your 3 burners. And I think coming up with some non-negotiables, this is my boundary, is actually a strategy that you can put in place to achieve that balance.
So do you think when someone graduates, they start working that first couple of years, they lose track of what it is that they really, why they got into podiatry in the first place and what they wanted to achieve? And they just get in a bit of a rut of just going to work, doing the same thing, lose sight of what really made them passionate. Are you there to sort of help them find that passion again?
Yeah, and hopefully not having to find it, but if we can help people not even lose it in the first place. So having those conversations with people very early on in the piece. And because it very much, especially when, not just for new graduates, but people at any aspect or at any point of their careers, if you're not working on your dreams, you're going to be working on someone else's, essentially. So if you are working in someone else's clinic, it is very easy to, lose sight of what excites you and what you find meaningful, because it's very easy to sort of fall into just running through the motions of doing what someone else wants you to do. So helping people keep in tune with, okay, so this might be where you're at now. And for some people, that's completely fine, because if what means more to them is having that time outside of work, so playing touch football on a Tuesday evening and spending time with the kids, then working on someone else's dream and having that, it might be fine, because they're actually still working on their dream. It's just not doing a massive podiatry clinic or having a massive podiatry clinic. But then if there's people who say they do have those longer term career goals in mind, so I want to be able to do this, I want to do that, I want to achieve this, kind of helping them formulate a little bit of a plan on how they can do that and do it in a way that's sustainable. Instead, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So where you think you're going to be in 2 years, it's going to take you 5 years. Where you think you'll be in 5 years, it might take 10 years, because you have to put all the pieces into place and not sacrifice the rest of your burners, friends, family, health.
Yeah. And I think sometimes too, you'll graduate and you'll look at somebody who's only been out, say, 3 or 5 years, and they seem to be doing very, very well. And they may be doing well, or it could just be on the surface. It looks like they're doing well. Yeah, it's like a duck treading water. And I think sometimes people think, oh, therefore I have to, for me to be successful, I must achieve the same thing in the next 3 to 5 years, because that's what they did. But they don't realize, what did they give up to achieve that in 3 to 5 years?
100%.
Or is it only what you can see, what you perceive is success in 3 to 5 years? And they could be debt up to their eyeballs, and their health is terrible and their family life is awful. But on the surface, everything is great.
Exactly. And I think we had a conversation about this quite a while ago, as the definition of success. Like, it's so individual, and figuring out, so pegging yourself against someone else's idea of success is just going to set you up to fail, because realistically, you need to find out what matters to you and what you deem as successful. So for some person, being successful may be, I own 15 clinics. For someone else, it may be, I can afford to, well, we can't go on an overseas holiday at the minute, but
let's pretend.
Yeah. So in non-COVID world,
Yeah.
Success for someone else might be working for someone else. I can spend the weekends with my kids. I finish work at 5 o'clock. I can afford to take my family on an overseas trip once a year. They're two very, very different things, but they can be equally as gratifying for the people that they are their goals, and that's what their success is.
Yeah. It's hard to, like I said, when we spoke about it, everybody's idea of success is different. I think sometimes we just get sucked into what other people think success is. So when I first graduated, to me, success was money.
Yep.
Whoever made the most money and had the best toys won. And then as time went on and the decades passed, then I realized that it didn't matter how much money I made. It didn't make me any happier. The more money I made, I did not all of a sudden go to my bank account and go, wow, I'm more happy because I have more money in my bank account. I didn't get happier until I was actually doing the parts of podiatry that I enjoyed.
Yep.
And the parts I enjoyed was actually running the business, not necessarily being in the room. I loved seeing the patients and I loved talking with the patients, but I used to say, I'm the laziest person I've ever met, and I'm prepared to work my ass off so I can be lazy.
That's so contrary. I love it.
I know, but that's what he say. I am prepared to work my ass off so I can be the laziest person in the world.
Yeah.
And because I used to look at when I was at work, just in the business, and there were other podiatrists there working, and I was just seeing the patients, how you doing, and making sure everything was running. I never felt like I was working. I was having too much fun.
Yep.
So, and that's what I meant by, I feel like I'm being really lazy because I'm not actually having to be in the room working. But that was just me. Whereas I know other podiatrists that they love nothing more than being in the room with that patient, solving problems. Just love it. Hate the business. They hate the business side of things.
Yeah, and that's it. Some people are built to be practitioners and they thrive on that. And then there's others that they thrive on the business aspect. And like, to be, you know how we were talking earlier about sort of finding what excites you. That's kind of how my career has evolved. So initially I did the rookie mistake that most of us do, was pegging our parameters of success on someone else.
Yeah.
And so I did follow what I found exciting, but it was sort of mixed in with the false parameters of success. So the biomechanics and musculoskeletal side of podiatry, I've always loved that. And yeah, it's my passion. I really enjoy it. So false parameters of success is, biomechanics clinic. So I opened a clinic and it did really, really well, but I found it very emotionally and mentally draining. But then when I had some new grads coming in working with me, what gave me this whole new lease on life was educating them and empowering them and building up their knowledge on how to implement all the biomechanics and musculoskeletal stuff clinically. That's what I got a huge kick out of. And then that sort of led into over time doing a little bit more of the education side. And yeah, then I sold the clinic and more focus was put on the education component. And now I've pulled the pin on practicing clinically for a while. I haven't missed it yet. I'm about 9 months in. But yeah, so the educational side is what really excites me. So I was still hugely passionate about podiatry. I still spend way too much time reading all the literature and everything like that. But the educational component, and a similar thing, I do have some days where I feel lazy with it because I'm not seeing any patients or clients. I'm just reading, and I might be reading at the beach. I'll have my laptop at the beach. I'll be doing lots of things, but putting all this content together. And that's what I get a huge kick out of. And it's got nothing to do with a podiatry clinic. I found that wasn't what fulfilled me. So it's
Simon Barthold says the same thing when he did the whole Barthold set up the Barthold biomechanics or Barthold clinical. It's called now. I think it's Barthold clinical now. But he said when he set all that up, the amount of reading that he is constantly doing, staying up to date with what the latest stuff is. But he obviously enjoys doing it, or you wouldn't do it.
Yep.
Yeah, you get a kick out of learning, and then when you're learning is taking what you've learned and then bringing that down. See, I would never sit down reading literature. That's just not me. Give me the synopsis. I'm more of a synopsis person. I let you do all the reading, and then I go, Talysha, Simon, can you put that into a one-page synopsis of what I need to know, and then show me how to apply it? That's me. I love going to your workshops. Send me to a workshop, teach me what to do, give me a synopsis.
Yeah, you'll love the subscriptions.
Whereas other people, like yourself, you sit there, I'd rather read Paul Hogan's book.
Oh, really? No, the literature, like for just a bit of perspective, last year when I was writing the exercise therapies course, I lost count, but I was well over 400 full journal articles that I'd read. And I think it was 3 textbooks back to back, and then God knows how many partial textbooks. So I don't even know how many words I read.
My literature at the moment.
Follow you.
Find your yellow tux. So, but that's what I mean about it's what floats your boat. It's what actually. See, I could sit there and I could read this, which I thought was pretty cool as well. Called Focused: Keeping Your Life on Track, One Choice at a Time. And she was like a down, the bobsled things, a single bobsledder, whatever they call it. It's probably got a certain name to it. But reading stuff like that about people's stories, reading marketing books, that floats my boat. That's what I really, really enjoy. Reading literature on podiatry, no, just the synopsis. Some people hear that and go, Tyson, you're awful. You shouldn't be saying that. But if we were all the same, geez, it'd be boring.
It would be very boring. And yeah, I think seeing so many people do so many things differently and understanding that it's completely okay to find something else that floats your boat versus the guy next door. I think that's how we're ending up with a very eclectic profession. And that's the stuff that helps move professions forward when you've got people that aren't sitting inside the box and they're thinking outside the box and they're pursuing different avenues, because you never know sort of how motivating you may be to someone else. And then they go, oh shit, Tyson's done that. Maybe I can look at doing this. Or, oh, Jackson's sort of given me this insight. I can use that to help myself. And I think the whole world of podiatry, I reckon in the last 5 years, I've found very exciting because it is evolving so rapidly.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. Years ago, it used to be, if you were right into business, which I've always been, people go, oh, you must be a shit podiatrist. No, I was a freaking good podiatrist, but I love the business side more.
Yep.
And they used to think, oh, people that read literature all the time, they must be really good podiatrists, but shit business people. But no, I know some people read all literature, they're bloody good business people as well. So people think you've got to be one or the other. And I think you can be both. You can do both areas. You can be a good podiatrist and a good business person.
Definitely. And it's when you bring in your blend of what works for you plus what excites you, then that's where, you find your little niche and become successful. So for some people, it's educational content and knowing how to deliver an online course. For other people, it's excellent communication skills and having an international podcast and business knowledge and expertise. So just being able to draw on all of that. And then there's other people who really good clinic, really good business mind, and they've got a fantastic clinic that they're making squillions off.
It's also how you learn. So I'm more practical. So to sit there and read literature or an article about something, I can bore it up about the third paragraph. Because I'll be going, just get to the punchline. Just tell me what I need to do. But sometimes, like I had, shit, I'm gonna have to edit this out of the podcast. This bit, it'll still be on the video. Shit, why can't I remember? Don't know why. Because your name came up. Your name was mentioned. Ben Lindsay on the.
Ben.
Ben. I don't know why. I had Lindsay stuck in my head, and not the Ben part. So anyway, when Ben Lindsay, we did the webinar, and we were talking about shin splint solution and all that. But he did this presentation for about an hour, and what I really, really liked about it was just the amount of research and literature he must have read to put that 1 hour presentation together. But the 1 hour presentation he put together, which is available on if you want to watch it on my YouTube channel, just go to Tyson Franklin, throw the plug in there. But that's how I like to learn. I'd rather him read all that information. I sit down, listen to it, and then get a practical demonstration on how to apply something.
Yep.
And that's my learning method. Whereas I know people like yourself, if you can dig through all the literature, you come out just bouncing off the walls, just absolutely 100%. Fired up. And we're all sitting there going, what are you on?
That's been me the last 72 hours.
Yeah, but you're like this every time I've spoken to you like this.
Yeah, okay, that's a fair point.
See, some people take drugs to get happy. You read a podiatry article and next thing you're bouncing off the walls.
Yeah, and build a website.
That's it. I love tech stuff. If someone shows me a microphone, I get all excited. So you mentioned before about a subscription thing that you're setting up.
Multiple. Do you
want to talk about what they're going to be or what you're planning on doing?
Yeah, so the first one is athletic footwear for podiatrists. So it's kind of come into play as an evolution of how, clinical practice has changed because of COVID, and people like in services in footwear stores, that's changed because of COVID, and all these restrictions have come in. So I have a lot to do with the running company in Adelaide, which Chris Chapman, or Chicken, who, funnily enough, he is the guy that got me inadvertently into running when I was at uni. So this is just a little bit of a circumvent, but the history of it is when I was in fourth year, one of my friends at uni, he worked at the Athlete's Foot and he was in with the Nike rep. And they organised that all of the fourth year podiatry students got a pair of Nike Frees. And so I got these free running shoes. I went, okay, I'll take up running. And I did. And since then, I've been a really avid runner. And when I moved to Adelaide a few years ago, I met with the running company because I was sort of networking and finding a good referrer, and their name kept coming up. So I met with Chris, and whilst we were talking, the penny dropped. I'm like, were you the Chris that And so 15, 16 years later, I'm back in touch with Chris, who he now owns the running company, which is a specialty running shoe store. And they've got stores in Brisbane, some in Victoria, and throughout Adelaide. So what we're doing is doing some live stream in-services to basically do technical updates for podiatrists. And in between that, The monthly subscription for the athletic footwear, which is more the podiatry focus side, is each month doing a bit of a tech dive. So I'll steal the comment from Troy, who I had on from Saucony a couple of weeks ago, who all running shoes, it's a game of foams. So people go, oh, there's the Nike Zoom X foam, there's Peba foams that all the running shoes companies are using. And it's like trying to keep up with the evolving tech is just mind-blowing, and how that actually will alter your footwear prescription. So each month in the athletic footwear subscription is a bit of a tech dive. So it's essentially an idiot's guide to some aspect of the technical aspect of footwear, and then going into the what's new in footwear. So like, for example, one of the articles that I've written that'll be out in it is the Saucony Kinvara. So comparing the 10, the 11 and 12. So people will go, okay, so there's a new model of the shoe come out. How is it different to the previous one? And there are some new releases of footwear that really will change the client experience when they're running in them. So doing a little bit of a breakdown of that. And then the case studies. So because footwear is essentially a treatment tool and not an afterthought. And oh God, there's hundreds of people. And because I'm not practicing clinically, but I'm still managing athletes. So each month there's a couple of case studies that we'll launch into in the footwear component of a treatment program. So was it the footwear that was causing the pathology, or how are we using the footwear for the management of their condition? And it can be different things, as far as altering foot strike patterns with different shoes to increase the lower extremity stiffness. So that's the first one, and basically really low cost, couple of cups of coffee a month basically. And just each month there's just the new release, the technical aspect, the product aspect, and then how you can use those footwear prescriptions clinically. So that's the first product that is happening. And then part of that subscription is every couple of months we'll do virtual in-services with the running company. So for podiatrists or physios that can't get in store to see what's new, we'll be bringing that to people through computers and mobile devices.
See, what I like about all these like subscriptions and online workshops and all that at the moment too, is people can use this as part of their CPD stuff.
Yep.
It all counts to different areas of the CPD. So where some people go, oh, I'm going to the conference. I'll only go to the conference because I need to get my CPD points up. Well, there's so many online things now that you don't necessarily need to do that.
Yeah, and that's why instead of doing one big subscription, we're creating sort of smaller ones. So there's the athletic footwear one, because some people are really interested in footwear, but then we have a mechanotherapy one, where that again comes down into the rule of three that we were talking about. So each month, the deep dive and a breakdown through an exercise video and breaking down the technical aspects of that exercise or movement really in depth, few literature reviews and also case study examples. So we've got them all packaged up separately, and they're all at a low cost, but you can bundle them. But why we're doing that is because there's some people that they're not that interested in the exercise prescription side of things, but they may be really interested in the footwear side of things. Or if you're someone that's interested in both, you can package it together and get both of the subscriptions. So it's just,
I think it's a good idea, because there'd be a lot of people who still want to know about the footwear, but they're just not interested in the other sports side of things, just the footwear and keeping up to that. So instead of them having to do all the research and read all the literature of footwear, they get a synopsis of the footwear all explained.
And it's because like there's so much that comes out every single month in every aspect of not just podiatry, but healthcare in general.
Yeah.
And just knowing where to start and how to break it down and get that knowledge just, decimated into really easy to consume content. And it's something that I wish I had 10 years ago.
Well, I think there's a lot of things we wish they were around 10 years ago. The podiatry profession, if how the podiatry profession is right now was how it was 10 years ago, it'd be scary to see where we are now. So you just know in the next 10 years, when I'm well and gone,
You'll still be talking.
I'm not saying I've left the planet. I'll still be talking somewhere. But just, yeah, I've seen a really big change over the last 5 or 10 years with podiatry. So I think the next 5 or 10 is it's actually pretty exciting for anyone who's like students listening to this podcast, anyone who's recently graduated. What you guys are going to be doing in 10 years' time I think it'll blow everyone's mind.
Yeah, it's going across the board. So I caught up with one of my colleagues yesterday. He's Angelo Salerno, podiatric surgeon.
Yeah.
And just, some of the things that are sort of evolving and happening in the land of podiatric surgery. And then he's involved with the uni, and there's other people at other unis down at La Trobe and Western Sydney Uni that I'm in communications with pretty regularly and talking to them about what's happening. And there's so many things that are evolving. So from the surgical perspective side, and then even within just general podiatry and through the Podiatry Association, and then through the universities, like there's so much change happening. And like you were saying, in the last 5-10 years is where it's really seemed to have taken off. And
I feel like the profession's starting to grow a set.
Yes.
Is like, I think back to when we graduated, probably before you were born. I went off in 88. Jesus, that's a long time ago.
I was 3.
Yeah, so when you were 3. But I just think, like, even going back 10, 15 years ago, it was sort of like, I felt the podiatry profession just kept thinking that they were lesser than the physiotherapy profession. And the amount of people say, I did podiatry because I couldn't get into physiotherapy. And I'm like, I feel it's changing now, where everyone's thinking we're better. We're better than the physios. We've got so much more scope on things that we can do that can make our work so much more exciting than, like, I couldn't think of anything worse than rubbing a hairy bum. Could not. The thought of that. Just imagine it all day. How can I help you? Oh, I've got a really sore glute, and you've got this hairy ass, and you're having to put oil on it, and you're rubbing it, and the person may not be the most hygienic person in the world, and you're getting that waft of sweat as you do. I'm just going, yeah, that's so prestigious. Let me put my hand up for that.
Oh my God, the mental imagery is just.
Now I'm sure there's other positives where there may be a good button in front of you, and you're rubbing it and go, this is an awesome job. But
there might be some medical legal issues with that process.
I think podiatry as a profession, like with what you're doing and what Simon's been doing for the last 150 years, because he's been out longer than me. But just this wave of, what Jackson's doing, just this wave of all this thinking is changing. And it's like podiatry is ready to take on the world and tell everyone how awesome we are.
I would 100% agree with that. And for contrast, like with the exercise therapies component, so like with the course that I launched last year, I had the idea it would be about 7 or 8 years ago, might be about 8 years ago. And I had some talks with some podiatrists, just trying to get a little bit of a lay of the land as far as how I could launch it and whatnot. And the amount of podiatrists, and most of these were ones that had been practicing for a few birthdays, the pushback I got from them was, we shouldn't be prescribing exercises. That's what physios are for. And that was the whole mindset. And I was just thinking, what the hell are we doing? Like, we're given all this knowledge to assess and diagnose musculoskeletal pathology. So even, 15 years ago, going through uni, we had the most information on how to do that. But then when it came to actual exercise therapies to manage it, it was, oh, wait, no. So we've got them to the diagnosis point, but then push them onto a physio who may not have done the assessment and the diagnosis stuff. So that was the pushback years ago. And now, podiatry has grown a pair. Like the amount of podiatrists that are just going, yes, I can assess, I can diagnose, and shit, I want to treat. So they're just, people are hungry for it, and the professional bodies are on board with it as well. So they're starting to see, the changing landscape of podiatry and are quite supportive of that as well. So it's like, it's more of a unified front within the profession going, yes, this is what we can and should be doing, which, quite different to a few years ago.
Oh, definitely different. And I like it. I like that I'm at the end of my career as far as clinically going. and sitting, like, I feel like I'm on the sidelines now watching all this happening. It's like watching a good rugby match. It's just great. Like, you've got physiotherapy on one side, podiatry on the other side, and just watching the podiatrists. It's like Queensland just starting to dominate New South Wales and just starting to roll out till New South Wales just don't know what's going on. I apologise to anyone from New South Wales who's listening to this. You know what I mean.
I was at Adelaide for the first State of Origin last year, and New South Wales, I got pumped. It was a really good game though, but it was heartbreaking.
Oh, that's right. You're from New South Wales, aren't you?
I am.
Sorry, I won't bring that up again.
Wait.
But it's one of those things. I think the change is good. I think it's motivating. I think it's inspiring what everybody's doing for, like I said before, a press record. I'm getting messages on a regular basis, and a lot of times from students who are listening to the podcast, just saying this podcast. Some of them were going to quit podiatry before I started this podcast. They've actually sent me messages and said, I was going to leave podiatry until I started listening to some of your guests, and they've just got me so fired up and excited about wanting to become a podiatrist. How awesome is that? So, and I think that's the power of not just this podcast, but anytime you write a blog article, you do anything, you put it out there, you don't know how that is being interpreted and how that's changing someone's life.
100%.
And this is for your patients as well.
Yeah, I think the power of influence we have, if we're sort of in some form of spotlight within a profession, or if you're sitting in front of a patient or a client, I think we all underestimate how much influence we can have on someone, whether positive, it goes both ways, positive or negative, but hopefully all for the positive, and keeping people in the profession. But that's like we spoke about last time I was on the podcast. Like, I almost dropped out of podiatry as well, because I was just going, what the hell am I doing? This is not for me. And your podcast, 15, 16 years ago, when I was thinking about dropping out of podiatry, probably would have saved me earlier on than having my lecturers going, don't quit, you've got a massive HECS debt.
I was lucky. I got out the year. I graduated the year before HECS came in. I remember we were all protesting at uni. Yeah, we're at the front of Parliament House. They've got placards up there, ranting and raving. Tyson, come and join us. I said, why do I give a shit? I'm not going to be here next year. They said, oh, that's the attitude we expected. So, if people want to contact you, find out more about the Progressive Podiatry Project, P3, not related to P20 in any way. How do they reach out to you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably one of the easiest ways to get me. But the Progressive Podiatry Project website's live, so it's just progressivepodiatryproject.com. And then we've got the Facebook avenue, so Kinetic Therapies AU on Facebook and P3 on Facebook. Lots of avenues.
So before we finish up, do you have a final tip for everybody who is listening to this today?
My final tip would be, as far as career progression and evolution, is surround yourself with people that excite you and are excited by your ideas, and follow what excites you. Those two things, surrounding yourself and finding your ideas that excites you, I think that's pretty much the cornerstone of what will set you up for success.
I think there's awesome advice. And when I do my marketing workshops, when I do my 12-week reboots, I talk about it all the time. It's all about finding what makes you happy in podiatry. And if you can find that out, and if you're not sure what it is, if you can't find what makes you happy, you're not asking yourself the right questions.
100%. I agree with that.
So, Talysha, thank you very much for coming on the Podiatry Legends podcast again. And I'm sure at some stage, probably another year, we'll have you back on here. You'll be doing something else amazing and we can share it with everybody.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tyson.